Imagine standing in the middle of thousands of armies, surrounded by lights, music, screaming fans, and the unmistakable energy of a BTS event. Now imagine holding an old-fashioned analog camera, hoping to capture just one unforgettable moment. But then something completely unexpected happens. J-Hope notices the camera, and suddenly, a simple analog camera becomes part of a moment that has ARMY talking, smiling, and replaying the footage again and again. But that is not the only reason this moment is getting attention. Because while J-Hope was interacting with the fans' camera, Jimin was once again doing something that ARMY has come to recognize so well: acknowledging fans, greeting them, and creating those tiny moments of connection that can mean far more than a few seconds on screen. So the big question is this: what really happened when J-Hope noticed the analog camera? Why did this seemingly ordinary interaction create such a strong emotional reaction among ARMY? And why do Jimin's simple greetings continue to feel so meaningful to fans around the world? Stay with us, because by the end of this story, we are going to look beyond the viral clip and explore why moments like these can become some of the most treasured memories for BTS fans. And perhaps the most surprising part is that there was no elaborate production behind this moment. No official photo shoot. No television interview. No carefully prepared scene. Just an artist, a fan, an analog camera, and a few precious seconds of interaction. That simplicity is exactly what makes the moment so special. When we think about BTS, we often imagine enormous stadiums, spectacular stages, thousands of lights, elaborate choreography, and performances watched by millions of people around the world. But sometimes, the moments fans remember most are much smaller. A smile. A wave. A glance. A short greeting. Or a simple interaction with something a fan brought from home. And this is where the analog camera enters the story. For younger fans who grew up surrounded by smartphones and digital photography, an analog camera can feel almost nostalgic. Unlike a modern phone, you cannot immediately see every picture you take. You cannot simply delete a photo and try again without thinking about it. Every frame matters. Every click counts. And because the result remains hidden until the film is developed, taking a photograph with an analog camera carries a special sense of anticipation. That is why an analog camera can mean so much more than just a device. It can become a time capsule, a physical object that preserves memories from a specific moment in someone's life. So imagine being the ARMY carrying that camera into a BTS event. Maybe the camera had already traveled with that fan before. Maybe it had captured friends, family, special occasions, or unforgettable days. And then, unexpectedly, it received attention from J-Hope. For the fan, that camera suddenly became connected to BTS. A normal object became part of an extraordinary memory. And that is exactly why ARMY reacted so strongly. It was not necessarily because J-Hope performed some huge gesture. It was because the interaction felt spontaneous, natural, unexpected, human. There is something incredibly touching about watching an artist notice a small detail belonging to a fan. Because to the fan, that detail matters. And when someone they admire notices it, the emotional value of that object can change forever. The camera may never be seen in exactly the same way again. Years from now, that fan might look at it and remember the moment when J-Hope noticed it. That is the power of live performances. The audience may be watching the same concert, but every person experiences a different story. One ARMY may remember a particular song. Another may remember a funny comment. Someone else may remember a wave from an idol. And another fan may remember the moment their analog camera suddenly became part of a BTS interaction. These stories may seem small from the outside, but for the people who lived them, they can become priceless. And then there is Jimin. For many ARMYs, Jimin has a reputation for creating gentle, emotional moments through small gestures. Sometimes it is a smile. Sometimes it is a wave. Sometimes it is a look toward the crowd. Those moments may last only a few seconds, but the emotional impact can last much longer. Think about what it feels like to be an ARMY who has traveled a long distance to see BTS. Perhaps you waited for hours. Perhaps you stood in line. Perhaps you saved money for months. Perhaps you traveled from another city or even another country. You finally enter the venue, surrounded by thousands of people, and you know there is almost no guarantee that your favorite member will notice you. Then, for a brief moment, Jimin looks in your direction. He smiles. He waves. He acknowledges the fans. Suddenly, everything feels different. That one tiny interaction can make all the waiting, traveling, and anticipation feel worthwhile. And this is one of the reasons Jimin's interactions with ARMY continue to generate so much emotional discussion online. Fans are not simply watching an idol on a giant screen. They are experiencing a moment of connection. Of course, we should always remember that short fan videos do not necessarily show the entire context of what happened. A few seconds of footage can capture only one part of a much longer event. That is why it is better to appreciate these moments without turning speculation into fact. What we can see is the interaction. What we can understand is the excitement it created. And what we can appreciate is the emotional meaning fans attach to it. That distinction matters. Because sometimes the most beautiful part of a fan moment is not trying to invent a hidden explanation. It is simply recognizing how much happiness that moment brought to someone. And that brings us back to J-Hope and the analog camera. There is something especially interesting about the contrast between modern global superstars and an old-fashioned camera. BTS represents one of the biggest musical phenomena of the digital era. Their performances are recorded on smartphones. Their moments spread instantly across social media. Fans can share clips within seconds. A single interaction can travel across the world before the event has even ended. Yet here we have an analog camera. Something slower. Something more deliberate. Something that forces the photographer to wait. In an era where everything happens instantly, the analog camera reminds us to slow down. Take one picture. Make it count. Remember the moment. And perhaps that is exactly what makes this interaction so emotionally appealing to ARMY. It feels like a collision between nostalgia and the present. A classic camera meeting a global superstar. A fan's personal memory meeting a BTS moment. And somewhere in the middle of it all, J-Hope's curiosity turns an ordinary object into something unforgettable. But the story becomes even more interesting when we consider the other members. J-Hope and Jimin have very different personalities and different ways of connecting with people. J-Hope often brings an energetic, playful, and spontaneous presence. Jimin, meanwhile, frequently creates a softer and more emotionally expressive atmosphere. When those different qualities appear within the same fan experience, it creates a beautiful contrast. One moment can make people laugh. Another can make them emotional. One member can attract attention through a spontaneous action. Another can make fans feel seen through a simple greeting. And together, these moments create the kind of memories that fans continue discussing long after the event is over. That is why BTS fandom culture is about more than simply listening to songs. For many ARMYs, it is about memories. It is about the first BTS song they heard, the first concert they attended, the friend they met because of BTS, the difficult day when a BTS song helped them keep going, the funny moment that made them laugh when they needed it most. And sometimes it is about a tiny interaction that nobody outside the fandom would fully understand. A wave from Jimin. A smile from J-Hope. A camera being noticed. A few seconds of eye contact. These moments can become deeply personal. And perhaps this is one reason BTS has maintained such a powerful emotional connection with fans across generations. Music may bring people together initially, but memories are what make the connection last. And when fans look back at their favorite BTS moments years later, they often remember details that have nothing to do with the official setlist. They remember what happened between the songs. They remember the jokes. They remember the reactions. They remember the unexpected interactions. They remember the atmosphere. And they remember how they felt. That last part may be the most important, because people do not always remember every detail of a particular day, but they often remember how that day made them feel. And for the ARMY connected to this camera moment, the feeling appears to be one of pure excitement and happiness. Imagine realizing that a camera you were carrying suddenly became part of the experience. Imagine looking back at the footage afterward and realizing that J-Hope had actually interacted with it. That is the kind of memory that can make someone smile years later. And then there is Jimin, continuing to greet and acknowledge ARMY in his own way. For fans, these gestures reinforce the feeling that the people on stage are not simply performing to an anonymous crowd. They know there are real people in front of them. People who waited. People who traveled. People who supported them. People who came to share the same moment. And while no artist can personally interact with every single fan in a massive venue, even the smallest acknowledgement can carry enormous emotional weight. That is why a simple greeting can become a headline inside a fandom. It may not be breaking news in the traditional sense, but emotionally, it can feel huge. And this is where the story becomes bigger than one viral clip. It becomes a reminder of why fans continue to treasure live BTS moments. Because concerts eventually end. The lights go off. The crowd goes home. The stage is taken down. But the memories remain. A photograph remains. A story remains. And sometimes, an old analog camera becomes a physical reminder of the night when everything unexpectedly came together. J-Hope, Jimin, BTS, and ARMY. But there is still one important question. Why did this particular moment resonate so strongly? Why did fans pay so much attention to something that lasted only a few seconds? Perhaps the answer is simple. Because it felt real. In a world filled with carefully edited content, staged photographs, promotional campaigns, and endless digital updates, spontaneous moments can feel incredibly precious. There is no perfect lighting. There is no rehearsed dialogue. There is no guarantee that the moment will happen again. It simply happens. And when fans capture it, they preserve something that can never be recreated in exactly the same way. That is the magic of live music. That is the magic of fandom. And perhaps that is the magic behind this particular BTS moment. But we are not finished yet. Because there is another layer to this story that deserves attention. What happens when we move beyond the camera itself and look at the emotional connection between BTS and ARMY? Why does Jimin's simple habit of greeting fans continue to generate such powerful reactions? And why can J-Hope's interaction with something as ordinary as an analog camera become a memory that a fan may carry for years? In part 2, we are going to explore exactly that. We will look more closely at the emotional meaning behind these small BTS interactions, the way fans interpret moments of acknowledgement, and why the smallest gestures from Jimin and J-Hope can sometimes become more memorable than the biggest moments on stage. Because perhaps the most beautiful thing about this story is not the camera. It is not even the viral video. It is the feeling behind it. The feeling that, for a few seconds, an ARMY was not simply another face in a massive crowd. They were noticed. They were acknowledged. And they became part of a memory that may stay with them for a lifetime.